And we're here. Claudia, welcome. Good morning and good evening for us. Welcome to our podcast.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
You're really welcome. I would just like to, start off with a preface in regards to your book. I truly enjoyed it, the Babylon Confidential one. We're gonna put the link down to the description and an image somewhere around here for people who are interested to take a look into it. I really enjoyed it. Your life was a full one and a really interesting one, and I think like 90% of people who look into it will stay hooked until the end of it. But one really interesting thing that like caught my attention immediately, basically because it was in the very introduction of the book, was a sentence in which you basically mentioned that when you were at around 5 years old, that you were imagining yourself either as an actress or as a dictator of a small country.
I think I said ruler, not dictator.
I'm pretty sure it was a dictator.
I don't think so.
I'm gonna have to reference it later.
Oh gosh, I hope it wasn't. Yeah, no, I think it was my inability to articulate at a young age that I wanted to have an impact on the world. I wanted to help people, and I didn't. I certainly wasn't thinking of anything that was negative when I wrote that. I just always felt that we were put here for a reason, and that reason is to help other human beings. That's always been my dream, and yet I proceeded to do a very selfish career, which is entertainment. But I thought in some small way that I was helping people through playing characters they could identify with, and maybe doing television and film that released people from their pain. Entertainment does that, especially during the pandemic.
Yeah.
We've seen people have relied tremendously on streaming entertainment so that they can do a myriad of things. It babysat their children, it provided comfort and relief. So entertainment can be thought of as trivial, but it can also be a way to reach people.
Yeah, and I think like this is something that I've actually gotten from talking with another guest who is an actor here in our country, and he was basically saying that entertainment as such, for example, like like the first association when a person hears entertainment, logically thinks of something fun. For example, comedy. And in terms of comedy, people often say that it should be easier, but it's actually a lot tougher to make people laugh than to make them sad. But let's not like dilute into those topics for the moment being. Would you say that, mixed with that wish to make people's lives better, to influence them in one way or shape or form, that in your like childhood 5-year-old wish to be a ruler or an actress was also a mixed a feeling of, as you mentioned in a couple of your talks as well as in your book, to be in control of the things around you?
Yes, I was not in control of a lot of things in my life. My brother died when I was very young. I had a strange affliction of obsessive compulsive disorder where I had to count things. Um, I had a lot of volatility in my childhood, especially after my brother died. A lot of unhappiness in the home, and yeah, so there was no control as a small child. I had three older brothers, and they were constantly tormenting me. So, as a quiet little girl and the baby of the bunch, it was very difficult to find peace or quiet or also privacy or any sort of alone time. So, I think after that, it certainly influenced me to want to control my environment, to get my own house, to move out very young. I moved out of the house at 16. So.
And when did you like first get that taste? I believe it was at 5 years old of being able to control your surroundings while being on stage, in this case of the theater.
Yes, I started in theater, and it was really the only time that I had the full attention of adults. I think because coming from a big, loud family with lots of boys, it was I was always quiet, and for the first time, I was speaking out, and so it made me feel, I don't know. I guess for a small child, it would make you feel important,
Hmm. Hmm.
maybe. maybe that people are listening to you. It was exciting. It was exciting.
And I mean, as you were so taking that portion of your life, like when you were just starting out, basically just starting out at around 5 years old, just feeling the audience's attention and feeling your own importance within that attention. Fast forward, let's say, to the age of 18, already having your roles and your attention within the shows like Dallas, like Falcon Crest. Later on, of course, amassing a number of fans through Babylon 5. What would you say was perhaps yet another important thing, and aside from gaining that importance and attention that you really enjoy within your work as an actress?
I think the most important moment for me was when I started to notice that some characters that I played really resonated with people. I played two transsexuals in legal dramas way before the whole acceptance of trans people. It was very, very early on. It was in the 1990s that I did this. And I suddenly had a trans community of fans that were really appreciative that I didn't play these characters in a very caricature way, a cartoony way. I played them very real. And then I played a bisexual character in Babylon 5 and a Jewish character to boot. And I suddenly got a fan base of people saying, wow, you helped me come out of the closet. You helped me accept my faith. It was really interesting. I started to see the power of playing well-written, well-portrayed characters, and that you could help heal people in a way. You could help them become motivated to explore their own issues or questions. So that I think was a revelation early on in my career. And I was really, really blessed to have been able to play some well-written, heroic but fallible characters who were not perfect, but they were exploring the essence of being human. And
yeah, I think that's really important actually to mention, because your characters, as you said, were heroic but fallible, meaning there was no glorification of the, how would I say, not that there wasn't any glorification, but their own, like, they were portrayed as individuals that the ordinary person, the person who is watching the TV, can actually, what's the word in English, who can actually think of them as similar to themselves and who can portray.
Connect to them. Identify with them. Yeah.
And would you say that your present career and your present work is essentially a continuation of your drive to help people and to actually show them through your own way of being that no matter how would I say, how much there's a saying in our language, which I'm going to roughly translate, are put ahead in the stars, are human as well. So basically my question is, would you say that your present work in, helping people deal with the alcohol use disorder is something that resonates with the first part of your career as well?
Absolutely. In fact, I have a group of fans that we refer to them as genre fans, that people who like science fiction and fantasy. And they have been supportive of everything I do, including my advocacy for the Sinclair method, the treatment that helped me with my alcohol use disorder. And because I played authoritative characters, like currently I'm playing the captain of the Los Angeles Police Department, because I'm played commanders and generals and action figures and stuff, there's a sense of, oh, wow, she knows what she's saying. So well, she knows what she's talking about. But at the same time, I wasn't afraid to come out and say, yes, I had an addiction to alcohol. I had a substance use disorder, and I'm not ashamed of it, because I didn't choose to do that. I didn't choose that to happen to me. So I think that having the same people have watched my journey, having the same people see me and not judge me and support me, has led to a much easier way for me to help other people. from a sense of being supported myself. I've been supported. My fans never made fun of me or got angry at me or said, "Oh, I can't believe you're drinking too much. You know, why don't you just..." Nothing. They completely loved me through this whole process, and that's given me the strength and the ability to love others through their process and to really truly enjoy exploring the whys. Why are you drinking so much, and how can I help you, and sharing this life-saving information that I received. And it's just given me a stronger platform, because sometimes you don't receive support from friends and family, but you can find support in the weirdest ways. I found it through my fans. I really did. I found this huge group of people who just adored me and wanted me to get better. And that's all I needed, really, to then pay it forward and help other people. If I didn't have that love and support, I don't know if I would have really been as successful in helping others, because I wouldn't have felt heard or supported or loved. And I probably would have hid, because I would have been filled with shame. Instead, I was told, "You're still our hero. We still love you. You know, despite everything, you're the best." And that filled me with such courage.
I think that's a really important message, which I would actually like us to return to afterwards, in terms of, being provided with love and respect, and just support being the most important thing that people can provide for people
Yes.
with any addiction whatsoever. But, tying that in with your acting career, and I think that this question will be really important for people to understand alcohol and addiction as such. Why? Because it has helped me. The question is basically, how does a person who seemingly, and I say seemingly because everyone has their own quirks, but who seemingly has everything under their control, who has fans who adore her, who has family who loves her, who has the career that's really lucrative and that she enjoys thoroughly, and that she worked hard for, and that she streamed for basically her whole life. How does a person who seemingly has everything under control fall under something that controls her?
That's a very loaded question. It's a very big question. I have alcoholism in my family, and addiction, substance use disorders on both sides of my family. I have two grandfathers who definitely misused alcohol. One who was definitely an alcoholic, the other one definitely drank too much, and a brother who struggled. So I would say I have the genetic predisposition to become an alcoholic. Had I never had a drink, I would not have become an alcoholic.
Yeah.
But I engaged in the behavior because it was acceptable and it was normal. And in the beginning, I didn't abuse alcohol. I just drank like everybody else. But if you have the genetic predisposition and you keep drinking, it's just a matter of time. It really is a matter of time before you start developing an alcohol use disorder. It could be when you're 22. I've seen clients as young as 16. The first time they ever take a drink, they get such a reinforcement, such a reward from it, they become immediately dependent upon it. I've seen people who don't develop AUD until they're probably 50, but the majority of them, it's 35, 40. I mean, people, it's kind of a theme. I see, now that I've been doing this over a decade, I can see the ages where it starts to progress. But I am seeing younger and younger people develop alcohol use disorder. A lot of 20-something-year-olds are coming to me, and that's scary to me. So to answer your question, I had the genetic predisposition. I engaged in the behavior, meaning I drank. And then at some point, I also have to take into consideration that I was using alcohol in a very unhealthy manner. If I was hurt or angry, it wasn't just for partying anymore. It was to stomp down emotions at some point. So it went from a quote unquote normal or healthy alcohol use, which people will argue and say no alcohol is healthy, but I'm just using this as storytelling, into really misusing it. And that's how it happened to me. Specifically, when it became an issue, I stopped drinking. And that's what caused the alcohol deprivation effect, which then caused me to relapse and become a binge drinker. So you have somebody who is normal, a light drinker, a social drinker, a wine collector, drinking a little bit more, drinking a little bit more. Now I've gained a little weight. I'm drinking too much. I figure, you know what, I better quit. I quit. I stop. Cravings kick in. I relapse a few months later, and now I'm a binge drinker. So that's the progression of what happened to me. But it all would not have started without that genetic predisposition. I have a brother who was an addict, and I have a brother who never developed an addiction. So out of 3 children that are living, 2 of them developed addictions. Mm-hmm. One did not. So you can say, well, why is he spared? We don't know. Maybe he didn't have the genetic predisposition. Maybe he doesn't have the same trauma that I had as a child. There's a number of things that why people drink. I think trauma is a huge one. Alcohol is a comfort for people, for many people, and they relate that comfort to that substance, that particular substance, whether they had a bad day, whether their parent was angry with them, or their spouse called them a name, or they lost their job, whatever emotional responses, they immediately gravitate towards, oh, I need a drink. Mm-hmm. And in the beginning, that might not be a problem because your neural pathways are still normal. But if you keep doing that and keep seeking comfort from that substance, your neural pathways are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And pretty soon now your tolerance is going up. It takes more alcohol to get that comfort feeling. You used to take 1 drink, now it takes the whole bottle. And now you've got a heavy, heavy tolerance. It takes a lot more to get you to feel even remotely comfortable. Now you're physically addicted. Now you're dependent. Now you're drinking all day. It's a really rapid decline.
It's a rapid decline. And there's one point which I'm really interested in that you mentioned earlier. Okay, so basically in your 20s, you were, you could say that you started drinking, let's say in your 20s. In 30s, you were a social drinker, more or less. And in the 40s, that's when the addiction itself you could say, manifested itself. And
late 30s, I is when I quit drinking, and that's when I became a binge drinker. So from that point on, I was either sober and miserable, or I was drinking and heavily drinking, or I was recovering from drinking. So that was my life.
So basically that falls into the category that you mentioned earlier on, like 35, 40, 45-year-olds mostly manifest that addiction. Our own country and the whole region here was in the war in the 1990s. And, I believe that, the addiction to alcohol in terms of those age groups isn't as pointed, so to speak, isn't as specific as you mentioned in our case, because it seems like in the last couple of years that 50-something and even 60-something-year-olds have started becoming addicted to alcohol, predominantly, of course, because of PTSD. But, to direct the question to the right direction, why is it the 35, the 40, and the 45-year-olds, in your opinion, that are the sort of people, like the groups of people that seem to actually start to get addicted to alcohol?
I think it just makes sense on a physiological level. I mean, if you start drinking at 14 or 15, before your brain is fully developed, you have a much higher chance of developing an alcohol use disorder already. Now, if you have parents who lived through a war or trouble, or who are traumatized or have PTSD, that is also going to influence your childhood, and you will have residual trauma from that. If you've lost a loved one, if you've experienced bullying in school. So all of this stuff adds up, and you start drinking very young. For some people, it takes 10, 20 years to actually learn this disorder of drinking. It takes them their brain that long for the neural pathways to become so pronounced that it becomes an issue. As I said, I'm seeing younger and younger people. I have 20-year-old alcoholics. 19-year-old alcoholics, 21, 20. I mean, I have clients, a lot of clients in their 20s that are binge drinkers, bad binge, I mean, really, really excessive binge drinkers like I was. And that scares the hell out of me. That means they developed this problem in 5-6 years. They started drinking at 15 and now they're full-blown dependent by 21. That to me is frightening. And that means their brain was hijacked so much quicker. And the only explanation I can say, I'm not a doctor or a scientist, but that they clearly had the predisposition and they get a massive reinforcement from alcohol, these kids. If you ever meet somebody, a young person in particular, who says, wow, the first time I tried alcohol, I felt like myself. Oof. I felt comfortable in my own skin. I was charming. I was comfortable in public. I could make friends. That's the kind of person that I see develops AUD so quickly, because they drink like 12 years old. They'll get in a fight with somebody. They'll come home and steal some of their parents' alcohol. They'll drink it and suddenly they feel free. They feel comfortable. That's really scary, because that tells me that their brain got a massive reward from that alcohol. And that's going to become highly addictive for them. That feeling, they're going to keep seeking that feeling. And then they're going to equate comfort and socializing and everything in their life with alcohol, because they can't be themselves without the alcohol. And that's a really scary place to be. If you don't feel like yourself without a substance in your body, then you're highly inclined to become addicted to that substance.
And I think that's a really important crossover, a really important point, because people tend to believe that, those people that drink and that actually drink too much, are just psychologically dependent on the substance. And in one part, okay, in the beginning, let's say taking the youngsters into equation, okay, that might be a part of it. You feel psychologically better. That's the reason why you want to drink. But sooner or later, again, as I'm getting from you, depending on the genetic predispositions, that, for example, beginning psychological, drive becomes biological. And I think that's a really important point, because people oftentimes, in regards to all addictions, just say, if you're addicted to something, just willpower your way through it and quit it. It's like, it's a mistake that I was making with my own parents. I mean, my own parents, my mom, for example, at the moment is smoking, they're both smoking cigarettes. And she has, progressively lowered the amount of cigarettes, my dad as well. But I remember telling them, maybe like a year ago or something, why don't you just quit? Isn't it just a decision? Don't you want a better life for yourself and us? And I was missing the point that it's not that they don't want. Yes.
They're dependent on nicotine. It can be, for some individuals, more addictive than heroin. Nicotine is one of the most difficult substances to quit. It is massively difficult. And unfortunately, naltrexone doesn't target nicotine, but drugs like Campril do. There are drugs specifically that you can take to decrease smoking. But nicotine is extremely hard. In fact, you will find people who've been off of cigarettes for decades, and they will literally, if they take one puff, they will be back to smoking 3 packs a day, like that. That means that their brain has not changed. Their brain is still highly addicted to nicotine. You see people go from cigarettes to the nicotine gum, Nicorette, or the patches, and they're highly addicted to that. It's a really addicting substance. So no, you can't just say no. On the other hand, you'll find this small group of people throughout the world, about 8% of the population, can quit anything easily. They can quit heroin. They can quit smoking. They can say, I'm never going to have a drink again, like my dad did. He said, you know what? I'm never going to drink again. And he didn't. There are people who can do that. They can say, I'm not going to eat chocolate or sugar or whatever, and they can do it. And it doesn't mean they're more disciplined or they have more willpower. It doesn't mean that they're better people. It means that they are able to do that. That's as simple as that. They're just in that small subset of the population that can quit things easily, without repercussions, without bad headaches or whatever.
Yeah, and that's, I believe, something that the person needs to make a distinction within their own minds, as I was like, as I had to, basically, this is like a full disclosure on my part. Before I watched your TEDx talk and before I read your book, I was thinking the same way that I was thinking that like 1 year ago, in regards to, quitting is just quitting something, or doing something for that matter is just a matter of willpower. Of course, like 8% of the population, as you said, might have not the willpower, but just the ability, to decide and to, just call it quits whenever they want. But for that 92% of population, that's not a viable goal.
Now, let me ask you something.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the brain disease, the brain disorder, bulimia, when
Mm-hmm.
people eat so much and then they throw it up, right?
Mm-hmm.
Does that seem like a logical thing to you to do?
Not at all.
Not logical. Okay. And a successful actress drinking herself to death, is that logical?
No.
Okay. And somebody counting things everywhere. They can't go on with life unless they count how many bricks are in the wall, how many flowers are on the tree. Is that logical?
Understandable, but not logical.
These are disorders of the brain. And in 1956, the American Medical Association labeled alcoholism as a disease of the brain. What we have found since then is that if you take a scan of somebody with an obsessive compulsive disorder or an eating disorder or a gambling addiction or an alcohol addiction, if you scan their brains, you can see they're different from a normal brain.
Mm-hmm.
The brain changes. So how can you just say to somebody, quit? It's not a logical condition. My brain changed, and I knew that because I had had anorexia. I had had OCD as a child. So when I developed alcohol use disorder, I knew my brain had changed because I knew what it felt like to have a brain that was something was wrong. When I used to count things as a child, I knew that was wrong, but I couldn't stop doing it. I literally couldn't stop doing it. Like people who wash their hands 100 times a day. That's not logical. There's nothing on your hands. Stop washing them. Your hands are bleeding. Stop washing them. They can't. It's not logical. So you cannot deal with addiction with logic. It's not rational. So how are you rationalizing with it? By talking about it. Telling your parents to just stop smoking is like telling you to stop breathing.
Yep. Yep.
I'm going to tell you to stop breathing right now. How long is that going to last? How much willpower do you have?
Yep.
Eventually you're going to breathe. Okay. It's exactly the same with addiction. And I know it doesn't make sense to anyone out there who's has a loved one who's suffering from a compulsive disorder of the brain. It doesn't make sense. And I understand that. So that's why we want to deal with the biological aspect of it first. You are so right when you say that there's so many people in their 50s and 60s who've developed AUD because of post-traumatic stress disorder or anxiety or stress in general. The pandemic has made alcohol use disorder skyrocket. I get younger and younger clients, but we want to deal with the biological aspect of the issue first. And if we can deal with that with a medication and make the person suffer less and get better faster, why not?
Yeah, exactly.
But it takes the understanding that you just got.
Yeah. It takes the understanding of the people who are around that person, not just the family, but the friends, and possibly, of course, acquaintances. And that might be the goal that we all could strive towards. But, in regards to, in order actually to explain the importance of dealing with the biological issue first, and then, the psychological things, the trauma in coherence or after that, could you just briefly perhaps go over your own pathway, over your own path to curing your own alcohol use disorder? In regards for the listeners to better understand your own journey, because as far as I read actually, and as far as I've actually heard on your TEDx talk, you relapsed as much as 20 times. And could you just go a little bit more in depth with regards to that?
Of course. So in my late 30s, when people started noticing I was drinking too much, I decided to do the logical thing and quit. And that's when the alcohol deprivation effect happened, which causes people to crave more and causes them to relapse more. So I became a binge drinker, and each binge got worse. In the beginning, it wasn't, it would take a day to feel better, but then it was 2 days, and then the binges were a little longer. They weren't just 1 day or 2 days, they were 3 days. I mean, it started getting worse. And I never quite got a year of sobriety. So I would get 6 months, 8 months, and then those times started getting shorter. I could only stay sober for 4 months. And then I would relapse, and then 4 months, and then 3 months. And my last relapse in 2009 was a really bad one. And it resulted in me needing to get a medical detox because I was afraid I was going to have a stroke. So I called a friend and they took me to a medical detox. And at that point, I was desperate. I had tried everything. I went to AA, 17 different meetings, 2 different countries. I tried hypnotherapy, psychotherapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, vitamin therapy, diet, exercise, replacement, you name it, I tried it. Rehab for $30,000. I was desperate. And as I walked out, I found a little flyer and I researched this thing, ended up being a medication called naltrexone. So I researched that, and this book popped up called The Cure for Alcoholism. And I was very skeptical, of course, because that title was ridiculous, Cure for Alcoholism. I read what was free online, and then I ordered the book, and I called my doctor, made an appointment. He refused me the medication. He said he wouldn't give it to me. So I went home and I ordered it online from a pharmacy because I was desperate once again. I really, after reading what I could of the book, I thought, this makes sense. It's like Pavlovian. It's like Pavlov's dog in reverse. You're unlearning the excess drinking. Every time you drink on an opiate blocker, you are unlearning the desire to drink more and more and more. In other words, you're getting an off button back. And that's what I had lost, my off button. I no longer had the ability to stop. So I wanted to be that person who had a drink or two and stopped, like I was in my 20s and 30s. So I stayed on, I finally got the medication, and I went on TSM in 2009. After being sober for about 3 months, the medication finally arrived from India. Thank God people don't have to do that anymore. So anyone listening, please don't order your medication online. You don't need to. That was a long time ago. Don't do that. Yeah, it took forever to get it. Anyway, I was so desperate that I didn't know if the pill was going to work, but I knew that I was going to relapse anyway. And I thought this binge would kill me. The next one would kill me. So this really was life or death. This was not something I was taking lightly. I didn't want to take a medication. I'm not on any medications. I don't take drugs. I didn't want to do this, but I was that desperate because the cravings were already starting again. And anyone who's experienced a craving, it's like, it just doesn't leave you alone. It's a mental obsession. It's like you can't think, you do anything, you can't work. It's just always alcohol, alcohol, alcohol. When can I drink? I can't drink. Even if you're sober, it's like you can't stop thinking about drinking. So I took the pill, I waited the hour, and I poured myself a glass of wine. I couldn't even finish it that first time. So that was a miracle. I stayed on TSM for 9 years. The majority of it was incredible and wonderful and perfect. It was my fault when it wasn't perfect and wonderful because I didn't comply a couple of times. And that was a huge mistake. And then after 9 years on TSM, in 2018, I was on a trip and I just decided to stop drinking, and I've never had a drink since. I don't know why. It doesn't really serve my life right now. But I'm not saying, oh, I'm sober now forever, because I don't know what's going to happen. I know that if I do ever drink again, I will take naltrexone and wait an hour. But in the meantime, I'm happy to be abstinent from alcohol. I feel great, and I have no cravings thanks to naltrexone. None. I don't even think about alcohol, which is a miracle in itself. Because before I found that in 2009, life was hell, and sobriety was not fun. Now sobriety is really fun because I chose it. It's my choice. It's not something that was enforced on me. It's just something that happened naturally. So it's a much better place to be.
Yeah, it makes sense. And what makes even more sense is what you mentioned in the very beginning, not in the beginning, but in the beginning in terms of taking naltrexone, is the way that it actually functions. It deals with the biological issue head on. And the issue here, as far as I understand, is all of those endorphins. It's basically like once you drink, once you engage into a behavior that made you an addict, in this case alcohol, in other cases whichever other case or thing it may be, is that once you take a sip of alcohol, in this case, you get that boost out of it, you get a reward. Whereas when you take an opiate blocker, it basically stops those endorphins in their track.
It blocks the reinforcement, the reward of alcohol. It doesn't block the buzz or feeling of relaxation. It doesn't block the taste. It doesn't block the social enjoyment of having a beer with your friends. What it blocks is the reinforcement. And that is the endorphin rush. And in particular some people get a much bigger endorphin reward from alcohol than other people. So sometimes in the beginning for people, drinking feels a little bit different, especially people who received that massive endorphin release from alcohol. But over time, your body adjusts to it and it starts to feel more like a normal drinking experience. I hesitate to say to people, oh, it's a buzz killer, because it's not. You can still get drunk. We just hope that you don't want to get drunk. That you stop after 2 or 3 drinks or 1 drink. That's the hope with naltrexone, is that it gives you back your off button. So you're not hiding, lying, stealing. You're not drinking in the morning. You're not, you get your life back again, really.
Yeah, but I mean, in regards to the success of the Sinclair method, in regards to, broadly speaking, the inefficiency to willpower yourself, either your own self or to the conversation with other people, in, using those things as tools to overcome addiction, aren't things like, I'm going to try to, be, as they say, politically correct here. Aren't the meetings such as Alcoholic Anonymous illogical? Because they don't they don't stop the cravings. They just manage, and this is something that you mentioned as well. You're in an environment where alcohol is being spoken about.
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things. First of all, I want to say that if Alcoholics Anonymous helped you, great. I'm happy for you. But it doesn't help the majority of people who try it. That's why they're constantly leaving the meetings, and it's a revolving door. And it's interesting to look at the success rate of AA, which most people will agree it's 5% or less. And when you think about how many people can quit things on their own, it kind of makes sense. So AA is peer support. And what that means is it is a group of like-minded people who come together to support each other in staying sober. And that's wonderful. If your goal is sobriety, then by all means, that's a great group of people to hang out with, because now you have new friends who don't drink. I think that's wonderful. But if your goal is sobriety and you have mind-crushing cravings, then why not get rid of the biological aspect of your addiction with naltrexone and also attend AA meetings? If your goal is abstinence, let's put them on a medication so that when they're in the meetings, they can listen, they can make friends, they're not obsessing about alcohol. So that's fine for 12-step programs. I just wish that they would put Camprosate, Topiramax, gabapentin, or any of these withdrawal medications or craving medications, naltrexone. I wish they would incorporate that into their program for people who constantly relapse. Instead, they incorporate punitive measures like taking your chips away from you after you've earned a month. Oh, you drank a beer, let's take your chips away, and bad, and it's all punitive, and you're failing. In my opinion, no. AA is failing the individual because it doesn't work for them. So let's help them. Let's give them a medication and put them back in the meetings if their goal is sobriety. So Well, I think that AA is great for a lot of people for support. It is not a medical treatment. It should not be thought of as a treatment. And for a doctor to tell a patient who says, I have a drinking problem, for a doctor to say, go to an AA meeting is the equivalent of telling somebody who's a diabetic and who desperately needs insulin to go to a meeting to learn how to eat. It's malpractice. AA is not a medical treatment. We're talking about a disease of the brain. There is no disease that doctors treat with a meeting. That is additional support for your disease. For instance, how to learn how to eat or how to learn how to handle stress for heart patients. But you don't just send them to those meetings. You give them a medication, a statin, insulin, and then you send them to the meetings to learn how to deal with life stresses and how to eat. This is ridiculous how we treat addiction. We're telling them to go to a peer support meeting for a life-threatening disease. By the way, a disease that is treatable and preventable. Instead, we're telling addicts to hit rock bottom. I want you to lose your house, your job, your family, your money. I want you to lose everything. Then you can get treatment. Who the hell does that for anything? It's barbaric. It is insane that we treat people this way. We treat our loved ones this way. Let's just wait until they lose their job. Then they'll know that they should stop drinking. This is ridiculous. We should treat them now. Meet them where they are in their drinking. We should treat the 25-year-old who's starting to binge drink right now before they become a full-blown alcoholic.
Yeah, and the way that we should actually, and I think that this would be a good topic to end our conversation and to end this podcast episode, the way that we are helping these people and ourselves in the process to deal with addiction is really, really important. And a part of those punitive measures that you mentioned, like in the Alcoholics Anonymous, and this is a really, really good sentence that you derived from a scientist, I cannot remember his name, but you mentioned in your TEDx talk, once again, we're going to put it down in the link description below, that there is already enough punishment in an addict's life.
Yeah, Dr. Keith Humphreys. Yeah, if punishment worked, there wouldn't be any alcoholics.
Yes.
Yeah. It doesn't work. And you know what Dr. Sinclair said when somebody said, well, isn't alcoholism a moral failing? Aren't they bad people? And you know what he said? He said, I never met any bad rats, because he worked with the rats that were alcoholic. There weren't good rats and bad rats. He worked with alcoholic rats and non-alcoholic rats. There was no good rats and bad rats. They were just alcoholic rats and not alcoholic rats. There's no moral failing on these rats' parts. Why are we immediately telling people who are mentally ill or who are addicted to a substance that they're bad people, or somebody who has an eating disorder? You know, it's really punitive. And I know we wanted to circle back to some advice for loved ones. If you have a loved one who's suffering from this, what they really need is they need love and support. And if you don't understand their addiction, that's fine. But all you need to say to them is this. Just say, I know you're struggling. It breaks my heart. If there's anything I can do for you, I'm here. That's all you need to say. I don't know what you're going through, but I'm here for you. That's all you need to say. You don't need to say, why don't you just stop? Or I can't believe you drank that much last night. Or you made a jerk of yourself. It's not going to help the situation. It's going to make them want to drink more or use more or throw up their food more. You just need to love them.
There needs to be a support, and there need to be doctors who understand that alcoholism, or better put, alcohol use disorder, is something that needs to be cured from a medical standpoint, and not just, and this is something that I believe would be a great message to end this, there needs to be a mix of both support from people who are like-minded, who want the best for you, but there also needs to be a sound medical practice, which is going to actually put a stop to the biological cravings and to the biological issue at hand in and of itself.
You summed it up perfectly.
Okay. Claudia, thank you very much for your input. Thank you very much for your time. And if there is anything else that you would like to add before we end our episode, now would be time to do it.
Yes, if anybody needs help with their drinking, please visit c3foundation.org. and you'll put the link to that's my nonprofit organization. Everything you need to start the Sinclair method is there, and there's free meetings, there's free drink logs, lots of support for free, Facebook pages, forums. There's a whole world of people all around this globe that are on the Sinclair method successfully from all age groups. And we're here to support you and help you.
Thank you very much, Claudia, and thank you very much for your work.
Thank you so much.